Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Julianne Meyer, and I am the host of Own Your Wellness, and I'm excited for our guest today. But before we get to that, I'm wondering if anybody saw the moon last night. Holy moly, that thing was amazing. I was driving. I kept seeing these people out on the freeway, on the overpasses with their phones out. And I thought, okay, is there an alien invasion? No, it's just this amazing, amazing moon. So hopefully you guys got to see it. But anyway, enough about that. For those of you who don't know, this is Mental Health Awareness Month. And so I'm exceptionally excited for our guest today, Miss Kelli Hansen. Let's bring her on. Hello.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me on.
I'm excited for you to be here. As I was saying to you privately, we haven't had an advocate for mental health awareness in quite a while on this show. And, what a perfect time. So welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, and May is Mental Health Awareness, and today happens to be the last day of Mental Health Week.
Oh, how fascinating.
Yes.
It worked out perfectly then.
Yes, exactly.
So I would love for you to share with the audience a little bit about yourself and your own wellness journey.
Absolutely. Like Julie said, my name's Kelli Hansen. I am the founder of BCC Evolution, which is a mental health and suicide awareness nonprofit. I started it in 2018 after I lost my middle sister to a completed suicide in 2017. It was just something I knew I couldn't sit around and do nothing, and I wanted to make an impact. So I put out the idea that I was going to start a nonprofit, and it led me into this journey that I didn't even know was something that I needed. But ultimately, I really that first year after she died, I was really just surviving. I wasn't even living. And I hit a brick wall towards the end of the year because I was just busy, going. And it was something super simple, and I lost it, I feel like. And then all of a sudden I was like, wow, I need to take a look at what's going on and change whatever's happening. And so I took some time off. I was working at a corporate job at the time and did talk therapy. And then later on that next year, I was introduced to neuro-linguistic programming, or NLP. And one of the sessions, I actually went to this 3-day event that I was like, yeah, it's going to be all motivational and it's going to be great. And the whole first day I was bawling, and I was like, what in the heck just happened? And so it was really because we did this process that was called The Day You Were Born, and it all centered, or ended up centering, around my sister. And I was able to forgive her and forgive myself. And that is really what led me into this journey of starting my nonprofit. And so BCC, because BCC and evolution, it has nothing to do with mental health, but BCC is because Carrie cared. My sister's name was Carrie. And then it also, for whatever reason, I thought about the blind carbon copy, email. You can put a whole bunch of names there, but nobody ever knows who's there. And that's really how I think about mental health. And then evolution, we're always evolving. And we were really centered around suicide prevention at first, but shifted into mental health because I've learned over time that a mental health challenge, whether it be for a moment or a lifetime, is really what leads people to complete the act of suicide. And so if we can get to that root cause of what's happening, then we can ultimately start saving lives. So that's really where the shift happened into this journey of mental health for me.
I really want to cry right now. I'm very inspired. I mean, it's a good thing. It's just, I'm so touched by, just what you shared, and your willingness to take something that was really unfortunate. I mean, for lack of, that really underscores what it was like, but you understand what I'm saying, to use something that was very painful in order to help not only yourself, but other people. And I think that people forget too, that, if one person is struggling, it's not like they're on an island by themselves. It does affect the people around them, but to them, it feels like they're on an island by themselves.
Yeah, it's definitely, the one thing that I've learned, because I didn't understand what my sister was going through, I So she had ultimately attempted suicide 6 other times. And for me, I'm the baby of 5 girls, and I just shut my emotions off because I was like, I didn't
Mhm.
understand why she wanted to not be on this planet.
Mhm.
And so I didn't see any of the signs or recognize any of the symptoms that she had before she passed. And so for me, that's why I created BCC Evolution, is because education is key. And I have absorbed like everything that I possibly can over the last 4 years. And what I'm trying to do is give back to people so that they understand, or at least can have those really hard conversations that nobody wants to have. And I've gotten really good at the uncomfortable conversations. And I think that really is what needs to happen, just centered around mental health and suicide in general, is having those tough conversations. And I'm not saying, I call them the shoulda, coulda, woulda, hoodoo, voodoo, we do's. I'm not saying that had I had these skills, I could have saved my sister's life. But what I'm saying is that I would have had a little bit more understanding and potentially would have been able to have that hard conversation so that she knew she wasn't really truly alone, although she felt that way.
I think that's a really good thing that you mentioned about the shoulda, coulda, woulda, and all that, because whenever somebody dies, before their time, or even if they're expected to, there's just this like, I could have done something else, I should have done, etc. And it's the what if game. And it's so, that survivor's guilt that some of us experience, that it's just all encompassing if you let it. And I just love the idea of empowering yourself as much as possible, but also letting go so that, life can be life. And, like you said, you might not have been able to save her, but you might have. And, it would have been nice for you to have those skills, but look at what you're doing now. And I mean, obviously, you know, it's just a hard situation all around, but I'm so excited that you are doing this because it is so needed. Something that you mentioned is signs. What are some signs that people can look for?
I mean, it is very different across the board, and it is going to depend on the person, the age, all things considered, right? But
Mhm.
one of the main things, especially when you're talking about suicide, is that people start pulling back.
Mhm.
So they're either starting to sever, and I can speak from my sister, right? Like I see all of them in retrospect now.
Mhm.
She had gotten in a fight with my oldest sister. She really wasn't, her and I's relationship, although she was that one person that I grew up my entire life and the closest. We were not close for the last about year and a half of her life. And she just started severing those relationships. The other thing is that my sister she was a very kept person. When we went to events, we had family gatherings. She would always have her makeup done, her hair done, dressed to the nines if need be. And I look now at the Christmas before she passed, and she was just very unkept, and her hair was all over the place. And it wasn't something that I thought about at that moment because she also was diagnosed with MS. And so
Mhm.
from the pain from that, it just seemed like it was normal at that point.
Mhm.
But now that I look at it in retrospect, I'm like, oh, wow, like those are things I could have picked up on, but I
Mhm.
didn't. So, yeah, it's those things like severing ties. You have to think about a person and their baseline. So, we all have our baseline. For me, I have, without makeup on, I have really dark circles under my eyes. That's normal. And so when I don't wear makeup, you can see those, but it doesn't necessarily mean I'm tired. It's just genetically how I am made
Mhm.
up. So that's my baseline. But if you're noticing, like, even when I'm wearing makeup, that my eyes are really, really dark, I present to be very, very tired, or maybe I'm like falling asleep in a chair, right? Like
Mhm.
that's abnormal on my baseline. So watching for the normal things and then the extremes, whether it be high or low, is something that I train people on to be looking out for. But like you said, it's all going to be different with different people. The other thing with when a person is potentially suicidal, they are possibly going to start giving away possessions, like prized possessions. Maybe you have a blankie that you've had your entire life, right? And all of a sudden they give away this blanket, or they're starting to pack up their items, just different things like that. The other thing that most people don't notice is mood shifts. So if you have a youth that has been really down and out, right? They didn't want to go to school. They are sleeping in all the time, or maybe not sleeping at all. But then all of a sudden they're wanting to go to school. And then all of a sudden it feels like they're out of this depression.
Yeah.
Those are the mood shifts that we miss most often, because it's not that they just magically came out of this depression. It's that more than likely, it's now that they've come to terms with what they're about to do, and they've also started creating a plan. And so those are like the shifts, whether it be from high to low or low to high, that a lot of people don't recognize, because for us as caregivers, we're like, oh, phew, like we feel like finally we can take a deep breath because they finally come out of whatever they were in. Yeah. But that's usually the moment that we miss more often than not.
That's a really good point to make, because I know for me, if I was in that situation, that's what I'd be thinking. I'd be thinking, oh, thank goodness things are finally starting to get better. You know, they're turning the corner, you know, just grateful to see the, you know, a shell, you know, more that person that I used to know coming back, you know, that sort of a thing. So I think that's really important to pay attention to. And I'm so glad you brought that up. You know, something that I was thinking about too is, you know, if if the person, maybe not suicidal, like somebody like me, I'm just going to use me as a perfect example, because, you know, I suffered from depression and anxiety and, you know, a bunch of other types of things like that. And I was basically just surviving, you know, the day, just trying to make it to bedtime. And when I finally got through it, I was still so detached from my feelings that I couldn't tell how I was feeling. So I used to, and this literally, I still do this to this day. It's left over, is if I have dishes in my sink, I know something's wrong, because I always do my dishes. So if I let dishes pile up, something is amiss, and I need to take a look and see what's going on, because something's not right. So I think that even if it's, you know, personal, like you got to figure out what's going to work so you don't get to that point.
Yeah, that's a great point too, and I can use myself. I know when I'm starting to get really overwhelmed because I have a really short fuse, something that my son or my fiance or any of my family does that just irritates me. I'm like, I should probably take a look at like what I'm doing, right? And being in the mental health world on a daily basis, I feel like I'm really bad at like that self-care piece, right? Like understanding I understand myself and my feelings probably more than I ever have in my entire life. However, I also don't know sometimes how to change it, right? Like it's easier said than done, like you said, and sometimes it's easier or not as easy to recognize when it's ourself or somebody that's closest to us. And I know that also with my sister is that it was harder and is harder for me still to this day to recognize with those people that are the closest to me, because I don't want to potentially interfere and have them mad at me, right? There's like this fear centered around like, what do I say? What do I do? Are they going to get mad at me? Are they not going to get mad at me? But then in retrospect, I also look at, well, had I taken it serious for my sister, right? Like, had that have changed things. But I think it's being aware of yourself or the other person and what's their baseline. Should their dishes be done? Right? You know, are they their happy-go-lucky self? And if they're not, ask the question, like ask a couple questions, open-ended questions. Don't ask anything that they can give you a yes or a no, because most of the time we're going to say like, I'm fine, right?
Mhm.
Or
Yeah.
yes,
F
I'm
word.
good. Yeah.
The F word.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, that's the best thing that I can say, is ask potentially layered questions, because as humans, we are conditioned to lie the very first time that we say something. And that's usually the yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, yes, sir, no, sir, pattern that we've come to live in. And so asking again usually gets you a response that is going to be more truthful. And then from there, you can ask more questions too.
So basically dig a little deeper.
Yes. Yeah. Especially with youth and teens and anybody younger, for sure.
I mean, I was bullied pretty bad as a kid. I don't know that I would have made it in this day and age with the internet and social media and all that. I don't know. I really, because I was such a sensitive kid anyway. Whew, I can only imagine how much worse it is now. Yeah. And that, just because it's so misleading, the social media, especially. I don't know. So speaking of self-care, because this has got me thinking, you are around what most people would consider sadness and, heavy stuff a lot. What do you do to keep things a little bit lighter for yourself?
That's a really great question.
When you think about it, because I bet you forget.
So I came to a point about, I want to say 2 years-ish ago, that I again, one of my coping mechanisms that I know is just keeping myself busy and constantly doing something. And it really came to a head again about 2 years, because the journey of grief, the journey of understanding is really a roller coaster. And so you're going to have your highs, your lows. It doesn't just go away, right? Like, you can't tell people to suck it up and get over it. Like, don't say those words. Anyways. So I actually, a couple years ago, I decided that I was going to create 7 strategies for myself. And I call them my 7 strategies for mental wellness. And so my first one is find something that lights you up. And for me, I know I can move this way, but Baby Yoda, see him in the background. He is one of my favorite. After Mandalorian came out, I was like, oh my gosh. So he just lights me up. It's something that lights me up every time I see him. My family literally has bought me a million trillion things of Baby Yoda. I have them all over and I can see them. My second strategy is find a way to release your happy juices. And so that can be like through volunteering, through exercising, through taking a walk, through reading a book, spending time with family, spending time with others, spending time with yourself. However, that brain, like, you have chemicals in your brain, endorphin, serotonin, dopamine, that really produce happy, like euphoria chemicals. And so find a way to release those happy juices. My third one is that words matter. So the words that you're telling yourself, the words that you're telling others. If I'm going around what I call the Eeyore syndrome, everybody hates me, nobody loves me, I'm just going to go eat worms, right? Like, that's what I'm going to start bringing into my reality. And it happens, trust me, all the time. If I'm like really down and out, that's all I absorb. If I'm like snap out of it, start talking like, I'm powerful, I'm strong, I can do this, I can get through anything. I use my superhero pose, so the Wonder Woman pose. But the words that you say to others and the words that you say to yourself really matter. And then number 4 is because I couldn't remind myself, but practice what you preach. So I design these so that I start practicing what I'm preaching, because I often forget. And so I had to add that one in there. And then number 5 is find a coach or mentor. So if you are someone who really truly struggles or experiences the highs and the lows, find somebody that can help you through this, because you really truly don't have to go at this alone. And there's so many out there of us around here that really truly care, and you don't have to feel alone. I think I probably forgot one, but I'm like, let's see, find something that lights you up.
Number 7.
Yeah, number 7. I'm like, I think I went through them too fast and I don't remember what 7 is.
That's okay. We'll come back to it.
Yeah. I'll think about it later,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Something that I was thinking about was the not going it alone. And, I had an experience where I went to see a psychiatrist because I needed a different medication for my depression. And he wanted to diagnose me as being bipolar without even knowing me. And he literally said it would be easier if you were, and all of this. And so needless to say, I never went back and saw that dude ever again, because he didn't want to hear me. He didn't want to actually help me. He just wanted to give me a pill. So I want to make sure that people understand too, that you don't have to stick with the very first person that you talk to if it doesn't feel right, because that person was not for me. He might be great for somebody else, but he was not for me. And I wasn't looking to get onto more medications, and that's just not where I was. But I think it's really important that you stand up for yourself too.
Yeah, I say advocate for yourself, advocate for your children, advocate for anybody that you're caregiving for, because like you said, that is important. I know, at least for me, I have multiple mentors just because I can't decide, I guess, or there's something that I can pick and choose from each of them. And like I told you earlier, I hit that brick wall in 2017, and the woman that I went to for counseling, although she filled what I needed at that time, she was not somebody that I would have chosen and or continued to go to. And that's really what led me into finding NLP, which was something that completely transformed my life, because now I'm actually like digging in a lot deeper, because it really works with your unconscious mind to understand and change whatever's happening versus just talking it out. For me, talk therapy didn't work as well as I needed it to. So I had to find an alternative type of modality. And it's something that I've stuck with. But I've also found other mentors that do other type of modalities, and so many different people. So through BCC Evolution, we have a slew of resources, whether they're in the professional or the holistic space. And for me, I handpick the people that I choose to refer people to, just so that I know that they're going to be helpful versus hurtful. Because that's the other thing, is that there's so many in general. It could be professional or holistic, right? That could potentially harm versus help. And so, like you said, advocate for yourself. If you're being put on a medication that doesn't feel right, advocate for yourself. If you're talking to somebody that it's just not clicking, that's totally okay to not stay with that person. Find the right person, because there's so many out there now, and you may have to wait for that perfect person potentially.
Well, I love the idea too of that it doesn't have to be just one person, because, it takes a village, as they say. So, why not have as many people in your corner as possible that are rooting for you? It doesn't have to be one perfect person. I'm not going to find Prada at a Walmart. It's like, and Walmart might have everything, but they don't have everything. So, expecting to find it all in one spot is really highly unlikely. So, it's okay to have more than one person in your corner.
Yeah. I've heard that from some of the most successful people in the world also, that they have lots of different mentors, right? Like you can have the coaching mentor, you can have the transformational mentor, you can have the financial, whatever it might be. And yeah, you don't necessarily just have to stick with one, speaking in the mental health space, like one specific, we call them modalities. So that's just the different types of therapies or helpers or holistic type of treatments, therapies, coaching, all of that. We just call them modalities. So you can pick and change what, or pick and choose, change. You can change it too, but
exactly.
yeah. Pick and choose which one actually works for you or doesn't work for you. And if it doesn't work, then advocate for yourself and let it be known that it's not working, and that's okay too.
Exactly. On that note, it is time for us to go to a commercial break. So we're going to be back in just a moment, Miss Kelli.
Perfect.
For those of you who are watching us live, thank you for being here. But as I mentioned, it is time for us to go to commercial. So we will be right back after these messages.
Are you someone who is struggling to move forward because you suffered a loss? Maybe you're even finding it difficult to complete the most basic tasks. Are you looking for a way to start enjoying life again without feeling guilty or the resistance to do so? Spiritual life coach Sarah Stockham saw a need for people who haven't learned how to grieve without putting their entire lives on pause. And so she created a program that solves this issue called Choosing Life Right Now. This program is simple and you can do it on your own. If you are ready to learn how to feel your grief while still being able to smile, to honor the sacredness of what took place as a loss, and yet still continue to live with joy, and if you'd like to take care of your whole being with grace and love, then I'd like to invite you to experience her new program called Choosing Life Right Now. Sarah is currently offering her program for the promotional price of $77, but it won't stay at this price for long. To learn more, check out her website. The address is on the screen.
When drug or alcohol addiction take over, things begin to disappear. Your friends, your family, and eventually, you. Recommended by Dr. Phil, New Method Wellness can help get your life back with individualized treatment plans for dual diagnosis clients. New Method Wellness provides the most highly credentialed treatment in a safe and welcome environment. Call New Method Wellness for your free consultation and ask about our national accreditations. Together, we can put the pieces back together.
Welcome back, everyone. If you're just joining us now, my name is Julianne Meyer, and you are watching Own Your Wellness. And today's guest is Kelli Hansen. Let's bring her back on. Welcome back.
Thank you.
So you have some exciting stuff coming up. I'd love for you to share with the audience what is just around the corner.
Yeah, we have, so BCC Evolution hosts a film festival every year. So this is our 4th annual film festival. It's the MHSA, or Mental Health Suicide Awareness Film Festival. And this year we are showcasing 14 films from across the world. So all of them are centered around mental health and suicide awareness. And I promise you, these films are incredible. It is so hard every year for my board and myself to narrow it down because we get entries from all over. due to pandemic, we ended up having to shift to virtual on our second year, which actually opened us up to the world. So now we're doing a hybrid model. So you can watch it in person in Denver, Colorado at the Bug Theater, or you can watch it virtually via Zoom, which gives you access to ask the filmmakers and their crew questions and they'll answer them live. So pretty cool. Yeah.
That is really cool. And to do that, can they go to your website here?
Yep. So if you go to bccevolution.org and it's under our events, so it shows as MHSA Film Festival, and you can grab your tickets there.
So out of curiosity, are these films like documentary style different, or is it like inspirational, or is it a little mix of everything?
We try to mix it up as much as possible. So we have I think there's 2 animated. We have, I want to say there's several documentaries, and then other ones are centered around mental health or suicide, and they're just more in a creative space. And we actually have 2 of the filmmakers, not even thinking about it when we picked them, but 2 of the filmmakers are local to Colorado. So we're going to have some filmmakers that are flying in, and then also the ones that are local that will be there with us on Sunday.
Oh, that's fabulous. And you say you do this every year.
We do. Yes.
That's a lot of work.
Yeah, it was the first event that we started with back in 2018, and it started out with 4 speakers and 4 films. And then COVID happened and we did it in my living room. And so that year we opened it up, and I was amazed by the amount of films that we received. I mean, literally the second year we had Malaysia, Vietnam, Netherlands, Canada, the USA. I mean, a gamut across the world. And for me, that opened up my eyes to say, mental health has no borders, right? We all struggle with the same things, and these films are being showcased across the world. How do we fit this all in our platform? And the next year we went back to in person with just a small amount of people and did the hybrid. And then this year is going to be, we have a bigger space this year with the hybrid model. But
I love that. I think that's absolutely amazing. You know, something that has never really made sense to me, and I'm just going to use it because, you know, there's such a stigma of mental health and you're not supposed to talk about it, and there's like something wrong with you and all this stuff. But, you know, I come from the addiction world, and mental health and addiction go hand in hand typically. So there's usually, I mean, I don't know anybody that's had an addiction issue that didn't have something underlying. So I just remember being at meetings with, you know, clients and things like that, and people would have a problem with somebody taking an antidepressant, for example, because that was altering their brain chemistry. And if they wanted to be sober, then they shouldn't be doing that. Mind you, it was all while they were smoking a cigarette and drinking their coffee. I'm just like, okay, so even in that world, there is still like a stigma, and it's so more common in that, you know, culture than in mainstream culture. So I just find it absolutely fascinating that something that affects every single person in one way or another, that it should be like hidden.
Yeah, we don't talk about it enough at all. And I know that mental health has been a huge focus, especially with the pandemic. And as humans, we are not conditioned to be isolated. Human touch and connection is huge as a human, as a living organism, right? And putting us into houses where we can't leave, and all of these things start coming up. And with substance use, it is definitely, it's a coping mechanism. But I actually just had this conversation earlier today. I do mental health Mondays, and we were talking about this, and it's really the understanding, like, why does that person utilize, whether it be substances or coffee or
Mm-hmm.
cigarettes, why do they use that type of thing to cope with, right?
Mm-hmm.
And my guest, I think, said it the best today, is that may be the one thing that is allowing them to survive.
Yeah.
And so understanding why they use versus judging them, I think
Mm-hmm.
is really important. And I talk a lot about being non-judgmental. It is probably the hardest thing you can possibly do across the board, but listening non-judgmentally is really, really important. And we generally, as humans, want to fix, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're constantly wanting to fix. We're constantly wanting to judge, and we're constantly wanting to tell people our own personal advice, which is not very helpful. And so getting that understanding of why you do what you do, and then replacing it with something healthy, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's not just you can quit tomorrow. No, you know what? Maybe that's the only thing that they can do today to stay alive.
Exactly.
So how do we shift or change what's actually going on? And it could potentially be a trauma that they maybe shoved down so far that they haven't ever really relived and or done the deep work on. And so how do we get down to that extra layer of what's really truly going on? And so, like substance abuse, yes, it is generally there's something underlying, whether it be a trauma or an actual mental health illness or disorder.
Mm-hmm.
It could be a lot of different things that are involved. And I mean, there is some genetics behind that too. So, but that's like a whole nother, whole nother subject. So, yeah, I think it's just like the understanding piece is like the key that I'm trying to say is let's understand more versus judging and telling people what they should or shouldn't do. And then take a deep look at yourself, like we were talking about earlier, is what's going on with me? Why do I feel like I need to tell people or give them my advice?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I should just hold back and ask some really great questions about what's going on with them to see if I can uncover something.
You know, I really love that idea of just listening, because most people don't. I know I've been guilty of listening to respond as opposed to listening to listen and hearing somebody. And sometimes that's all the person actually even needs, is to be heard or to say something out loud so they can hear themselves. You know, they don't necessarily, I know that women sometimes have a problem with their significant others trying to solve all their problems for them when they're just trying to talk about, you know, it's kind of the same idea. It's like, yeah, no. And you said something that I really want to highlight, that maybe that's the one thing that's keeping them alive. I haven't heard a lot of people say that, and it's something that I believe fundamentally. And, you know, you can't just take away somebody's coping mechanism and leave an empty hole. First of all, that hole is going to be filled with something. So you can't just, you know, leave it empty and think that's going to solve the problem if you don't address what the actual issue is. Because like you said, there's a reason why. That's not, it didn't come from nowhere. Mm-hmm. So I think that's important to mention, like reiterate and highlight.
Yeah, it doesn't magically just appear one day. You don't like wake up and be like, I'm going to smoke cigarettes today because it seems like a good idea, right? Like there's usually something else going on, unless you're younger and maybe your friends introduced you to it, right? Like that's a different story, but there's usually something that leads them to that. Mm-hmm. The other thing that I wanted to mention that you said is listening to respond. And one thing that I teach and talk about is paraphrasing. So you actually use their words, not paraphrasing, because that's using your own words in what they said, but literally using the words that are coming out of their mouth. And it also helps them, like you said, is to, like, your brain will get more clarity hearing what just came out of your mouth. Because a lot of times especially when you're in like a deep, dark place, you may not understand what's going through your head at all. So you may not know how to express it. So a lot of things come out. It's just like verbal vomit sometimes. And so being able to verbal vomit that back to them sometimes helps them get more clarity in their brain as to what's really truly going on. So you can use paraphrasing to actively listen, or, you know, not listen to respond.
You know, that's actually really brilliant. I have a friend that does that with her husband, and 99% of the time he's like, that's not what I said, or that's not what I mean at all. And it's fascinating. And I am so guilty of this. I don't listen to what I say. So, you know, I can say all kinds of stuff and be like, what? Where'd that, you know, somebody repeat it back, and I'm, you know, no idea that I'm the one who said that.
Yes.
So it does help. It does help to paraphrase. I love that. It's I'm glad you said it slowly so that people can really hear.
Yeah, I say it sometimes fast. I tend to talk fast, and then they're like, paraphrasing. I'm like, no, that's not what I said. Paraphrasing.
Like the bird.
Yeah. Like if you got a bird, it would tell you exactly what you're saying. So that's also a great practice if maybe you live by yourself and you can get a parrot. I don't know.
That would be fun. One way to utilize. Oh my goodness. So, you know, I really love that, the idea of building community too, so that people don't feel so alone. Do you have any ideas of like what people can do, especially because they're coming out of COVID and, you know, this whole thing where we've been so isolated that it feels weird to get out there again? Like, any suggestions for maybe a group that somebody could attend, or, you know, just ideas on how to put yourself out there again?
I think, I mean, as a lot of people are starting to come out, right? I think we have been, but we still have that, oh my gosh, is there too many people here? Oh my gosh, am I going to get COVID? Right? Like there's a lot of fear that happens and is centered around what we all just experienced. It's not anything that we have ever in the past. So we're not exactly sure how to navigate it from here. But I think the important thing is do what you regularly would have done, right? Like concerts are okay. Going to festivals, it's okay. There are precautions in place. And if you don't feel comfortable, then don't go. But like I was saying, is that human connection is so important, especially for our mental health. And I mean, it can literally calm your nervous system by just even like touching somebody. And if you live by yourself, that could be something that could be beneficial for you, is getting out, giving people hugs, right? Unless maybe you do that, but connection is really, so at least for me, I have been going about life as if it's normal. Sometimes that is really scary for some people, and that's okay. If you're feeling really overwhelmed or feeling anxious, remove yourself from the situation. Again, advocate for yourself, right? Even in those spaces. The other thing is that having Zoom, I know everybody's probably so over Zoom calls, right? Like, get me off of the screen. And it really is interesting when you actually start seeing people in person. You're like, oh man, I see you in a body form, right?
I know. Oh man, I have to wear pants. That's my thing. I'm like, oh, I can't be business on the top, party on the bottom. Okay.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely, I mean, it's very interesting. My board, we had them online for so long. And then finally we had our gala this year in person. And I was like, oh, hey, you're more than just a box, which is awesome.
Well, something, yeah, I've discovered too. I'm like, wow, you're really short, or
you're really tall.
I know. Wow. I was not expecting you to be so tall.
Right.
Well,
yeah.
A lot of people that I had, you know, hadn't met in person yet, they thought I was really tall, and then they meet me and they're they're tall, I am not. And so they're just like, I thought you'd be taller.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and even the mask, right? Like everybody was
Yeah.
wearing a mask and then all of a sudden masks are gone and you're like, whoa, you have a mouth. Like it's
I
just
know. I know. So I
fun.
donate plasma, and yeah, everybody's wearing masks for the longest time, obviously. But then as soon as they weren't, I was like, it took me a while to figure out who was who. I couldn't recognize them when I could see their whole face.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely, I mean, if you think about even the kids that were going to school, right? Like my son, he went to kindergarten all masked, right? Like they didn't have a chance to ever take off their masks. And then in first grade, they started the year with masks and then were able to take them off. And so even when you think about youth and kids that some of them, that's all they knew for
Mhm.
a period of time. And so the connection thing, right? Like connection is huge because we haven't gotten enough connection in the last couple of years. And I know at least BCC Evolution, if you are in Colorado, we have a networking group that we do every single month. And it's really just for anyone who has experienced grief or loss or just needs like that tribe of people that really truly understand what they may or may not be going through.
Mhm.
And so you can find more information on our website. It's called Surviving the Storm.
Ooh, I like
And
that.
it's just a support group that doesn't have any we don't have like any set anything we do, right? Like we go to Dough Dreamery, which is an edible cookie dough place in Parker,
Ooh.
Colorado. So we eat cookie dough and we just talk. So
You know, it takes the pressure off too. And I just think that especially with grief, it's like if you don't, it's hard because you feel guilty when you're happy and you feel bad when you feel bad. It's like you can't catch a break.
Yeah.
You know, it's okay to have all these emotions and ride the waves and know, you know, it's okay to be. I just wish that people explained that to me when I was younger because I lost my mom really young. And, you know, it would have been nice to have known that it's okay to be happy when I'm happy, even though she passed away. It doesn't mean that I don't miss her, you know, all of that stuff. So it's nice that you guys just take some of the pressure off or to just be able to sit there and forget for a little while and just have some fun, lighten up, you know, just for like those few minutes while you can have that opportunity to.
Yeah, and that's what I always say is that you can tell your story or you don't have to tell your story. And
That's
it's
beautiful.
not all about loss. And I mean,
Mhm.
some people that come, they went through a really bad divorce that they're just still in that grief process. I
Yeah.
think grief translates across so many different things and it's not just loss based, right? It's you could experience trauma and grief in so many different ways. And
Mhm.
so just coming and being with people that understand that maybe you aren't going through something and you do or don't want to talk about it, and that's absolutely okay. Maybe you just want to eat cookie dough and that's okay
Yeah.
too. So
No, I love that. And I love that you made that distinction too, because, you know, I mean, to me, divorce is a loss in a different way, but there's just, I mean, it doesn't, the thing with, I'm going to say this, and I'm sure that you know this too, is especially when somebody experiences a trauma, they always like compare themselves to somebody else. Like it's not as bad as so and so, but that doesn't mean that what you're going through isn't important. It doesn't mean that you're not allowed to have your feelings. It doesn't mean that you know you're not allowed to be sad or hurt or upset or whatever you know the case may be. You're allowed to have those feelings, and you don't need to start comparing traumas and things like that because it's that important to you, and that's what matters.
I love that you brought that up too, because that is so true that we tend to downplay whatever we're experiencing because
Mhm.
our brains naturally veer away from pain and we want to veer towards pleasure. And so we downplay what's actually going through or whatever we're experiencing because it's
Mhm.
not as bad as so and so. But it doesn't have to be as bad as so and so, right? Like
Yeah.
you are absolutely okay to experience whatever you're experiencing, and you don't have to compare yourself. So I love that you brought that up too, is my trauma is going to be completely different than other people's. I mean, I literally could stub my toe on a table and that could be very traumatic for me, but maybe for somebody who's done it multiple times, it's not traumatic for them, right? And so not comparing and just understanding, going back to the understanding of what I'm experiencing may not be the same as other people. And I never think that there's like a one right way. Grief is a roller coaster. One of my friends said it the best. She says that you learn to grow forward. You never get over it, but you do learn how to grow forward. And it's okay. Like, I can talk about my sister now. It took me quite some time before I could ever speak her name, but I can now celebrate her. And that's what I choose to do. And maybe somebody else doesn't choose to celebrate the lives of somebody that they lost. And that's okay too. But don't compare and don't judge how somebody chooses to move through grief.
Exactly. And that load of crap that it takes a year. I don't know who came up with that. It doesn't work like that. It's like you said, it's that roller coaster. It is just up and down and all around. And it comes back and bites you in the butt years later.
Yeah. There's days I wake up and I'm just like, it's like a wave of emotions. And I'm like, holy, I thought I like moved through this, but apparently I haven't. And that's okay. And one thing that I do is I allow myself to experience whatever emotion, which is something that I never had done prior to my sister passing. Normally I would just get over it, right? Like that was the thing of whatever was in my head was like, oh, just get over it. It's fine. Or this too shall pass. I hate that. It like drives me crazy. But yeah, I have learned now to be okay with what I'm experiencing, and some days are good and some days are bad, and that's okay. So
yeah, and I love that idea too of showing yourself some grace and being okay with, today's maybe not a good day. And that's okay. Tomorrow, hopefully it will be better, but right now this is what it is, and I'm going to do my best.
Yeah. Grace is definitely something that I've learned to give myself more in the last couple of years than I ever did. And it's probably been one of the most transforming thoughts or processes that I've really understood about myself. And so, yeah, I think it's important to give yourself grace and be okay with whatever you're going through. So
yeah. We are almost out of time. We only have about a minute left. Is there any final thoughts that you'd love to share with the audience, or, something you want to make sure you say again?
Well, join us. I mean, if you can, it's virtually and in person for the MHSA Film Festival this Sunday, May 22nd. It's from 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. And I just like to say, mental health, there's no borders. There's, it crosses everybody. There's no race, no gender, nothing, right? Like mental health affects us all. We all have a brain and we all can be affected by mental health. So if you open your minds, hearts, and mouths together, we can make mental health matter.
I love that. Thank you so much for being on the show today, Kelli. I really appreciate you being here. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
Thank you. We'll see you again soon. Well, everyone, that is all the time that we have for today. So enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll see you on Thursday. See you then.